when I'm really reframing and inviting people into a new paradigm is the sense of, okay, yeah, you might let go of some things because I think the next level of our life requires the next level of who we are, which requires that we do let go and surrender what's no longer working anymore.
I'm Heather Grish, and this is the Wisdom of the Body podcast. This podcast explores the idea of body intelligence as the real key to learning the knowledge of life, or what we call Ayurveda in the ancient language of Sanskrit. We do that by connecting with today's creative leaders and experts who will help you listen to your body, trust your gut, and live in deeper harmony with nature. Come join me as we unlock the golden door to clear, direct perception and become very deep listeners. You can find the Wisdom of the Body podcast on Apple, Spotify, and Stitcher. You can also follow us by joining my email at heathergrish.com or on Instagram at heathergrish. I know you're going to love this podcast, so take a second right now to subscribe. Today I'm here with Kute Blackson, who's a beloved inspirational speaker and transformational teacher. He speaks at countless events he organizes around the world, as well as outside events including AFEST, YPO, which is Young Presidents Organization, and EO, or Entrepreneurs Organization. He's a member of the Transformational Leadership Council, which is a select group of 100 of the world's foremost authorities in the personal development industry. He's a winner of the 2019 Unity New Thought Walden Award, and he's widely considered a next-generation leader in the field of personal development. His mission is simple: to awaken and inspire people across the planet to access inner freedom, live authentically, and fulfill their true life's purpose. Thank you so much for joining us today, Kute.
Thanks for having me.
I'm nervous to talk with you about surrender. It's like...
No, they say nervousness is excitement without breath, so we just get to breathe together,
Yeah, it's crazy when I think about surrender. I get like, wait, what? Is there something that I have to let go of control of?
That's exciting.
Yeah. So you've just written this amazing book, your second book, which is The Magic of Surrender, Finding the Courage to Let Go. And, it's interesting because I studied yoga for many years. I became a yoga teacher, and surrender was a big theme of that journey. And I think for a really long time, and probably even in moments now, I don't know that I could really identify what surrender really was. And sometimes for me, I find it easier to think about what something is when I think about its opposite. So how does a person know when he or she is not surrendering?
I think when we're not surrendering, we are not in flow. When we're not surrendering, we are resisting. When we're not surrendering, we're trying to manipulate, control, and force life into what we think things should be. When we're not surrendering, it's like being in the ocean and surfing, but instead of feeling for the wave and where the wave is moving and going, we're either trying to create, like imagine you take a hose and you're trying to just make a wave out of nothing, or you are swimming in the opposite direction of the wave. And so not surrendering is when you're resisting the natural impulse of your truth, when you're resisting who you are, when you're resisting what's seeking to happen. So that sense of resisting life, resisting the flow, resisting what's true, resisting the deep, authentic feeling, resisting, kind of what life is seeking to unfold, is not surrendering. And I think when we're in resistance, we block ourselves, we block the flow, we block our blessing, we block grace. And so to surrender on some level is the willingness to stop trying to control. So when we're not surrendering, we're busy trying to control everything to fit life into our, shall we say, limited idea of how we think life should look, how we think we should be. But to surrender is to let go of the idea of who we think we should be, to let go of the idea of the life that we think we should be having. Because many times we have this idea of the life we think we should be living, and perhaps the life we have is not matching the life we think we should be having. And so we have this idea of the life we think we should be living, and who we think we should be, and how we think we should be, and how we think other people should be, and how we think our relationship should be, rather than the willingness to open to the life that is seeking to happen, authentically and truly. And so I think surrender is a willingness to be open. Surrender is a willingness to live curiously. Surrender is a willingness to not just control, but allow oneself to feel the deepest truth and be guided by life, to let life guide you. And I think that's the beauty. I think all of the great ones at some point in their lives reached a point where they all surrendered. Whether it was Jesus, whether it was Buddha, whether it was Gandhi, whether it was Bruce Lee, whether it was Muhammad Ali, whether it was Mother Teresa, whether it was Martin Luther King, they all had to let go, surrender themselves to the deeper impulse of what life was seeking to express through them. And I think when we are able to live in that willingness, the curiosity, the openness, we become available to, shall we say, the infinite possibilities of life. Most of the time, from a personality and ego perspective, we're not able to see the bigger picture and the infinite possibilities of life. We just want what we want. And so to not be surrendered is just to try to want what you want and force that, but to be surrendered is to fully available to the infinite possibilities of life. And I think in that way, what often ends up happening when we're open and truly available is life often unfolds and manifests and shows up in ways that we could not have imagined, ways that we could not have planned, ways that we could not have thought of for ourselves, because many times what we think we want, and we set goals and dreams and desires based on what we think we want, but many times what we think we want is not necessarily what we really want. It's just what we think we wanted based on who we thought we were. And it's limited. And so if we're not in touch with who we really are, then even our goals and our desires of what we're attached to having will also be limited. And so I think surrender is just openness, availability.
And what actually inspired you to write a book about this topic? I mean, a whole book on surrender.
A whole book. I'll be honest, this was not the book I thought I was going to write. I thought I was going to write another book. One day I sat down at my desk. I got a whiteboard that was the size of a huge wall, and I started to brainstorm all kinds of ideas. And great ideas, by the way. Ideas that I thought would be bestsellers, a New York Times bestseller. And I thought, people would love this, and they would love that, and they want this, and they want that, and this would appeal to people. And the people, oh my God, this is a niche that hasn't been tapped, and this would be great for marketing, and came up with all these amazing titles. I mean, hundreds of ideas. And honestly, one day I stepped back and I looked at all of these great ideas, but what came through, and it wasn't what I wanted, it wasn't what I would have, I as Kute, an individual, a personality, my personality would have chosen. But what came through very clearly, undeniably, to deny it would have been to resist it, and that would not have been surrender, was the theme of surrender. It's like the soul of the book dropped into my awareness, and I thought, holy smokes, the book is about surrender. And I remember that moment because it was so obviously clear. It had been right in front of me the entire time of brainstorming, but somehow I didn't see it, yet I couldn't believe it. And I thought, no, it's not surrender. I don't want to write about surrender. I mean, it's so, like, as you said, kind of nerve-wracking, and is, oh my God, and I'm a little afraid, and it's scary, and it's exciting. And I felt the soul of the book come through. And I felt that this was the book. This is pre-COVID, a year before COVID. This was the book that was seeking to be written. It had an intelligence of its own. And my job was simply to not write this book. My job was to surrender to the message and surrender to the book that was seeking to be written. So I had to go through my own process of surrender to surrendering to the book that was seeking to be written. But when I was finally able to say, okay, this is undeniably what I feel coming through, and it's true. The book doesn't belong to me. It's not even my book. This is the book that life is seeking to express, and it just happens to be expressing through me. I realized that my job was to be a servant to the book and be a vessel for the book and serve the soul and the destiny of this book. And that shifted everything. It wasn't like I was writing the book anymore. And that's when I saw everything flow, the ideas, the structure, the stories, the vibe. And I wanted to really, shall we say, recontextualize, reframe surrender in a way and make surrender accessible to just the modern day, the everyday person, the new generation. We often think surrender is just for the spiritual ones, you know. We often think surrender is for the yogis in the mountains and the monks and the nuns in the Himalayas. And we have this idea that surrender is weak and surrender is passive and surrender means you're going to get taken advantage of, and surrender means you can't really function everyday life and have a relationship and have kids. And if you surrender, you won't manifest your dreams, you won't manifest your desires, you won't get what you want, and you're going to lose a whole bunch of stuff. And so who the hell wants to surrender with that sort of idea? And so what I'm really reframing and inviting people into a new paradigm is the sense of, okay, yeah, you might let go of some things, because I think the next level of our life requires the next level of who we are, which requires that we do let go and surrender what's no longer working anymore. Old relationships, old paradigms, old stories, old beliefs about ourselves, old ways of doing things, old addictions. It does require that we let go of what's not working so that we can make room for the new. And so for me, the question through the book that I pose to people is, yes, through surrender, what if you actually got more? Not less. What if you got more than you could imagine? What if you got more than you could have imagined for yourself? What if you got more? And in surrender, what if you were able to open to life, surrender to the bigness of life? What would it be like to allow life to live you, to express through you, to create through you? This is what I saw Mandela did. This is what I saw Buddha did. This is what I saw Muhammad Ali do. This is what I saw Martin Luther King did. What they were able to do in their moment of surrender is they tapped into an infinite stream of energy. They tapped into the power of the universe, and they were in the flow. And when we surrender, I believe that's when the universe, life, the intelligence, the creative force, nature rises to support us. And so what if what life can do through you is more than what you can do of yourself? And that's when I believe miracles happen. And so I really saw that for me, the theme of surrender was a piece of my life growing up. One of the seeds of the book also, to answer your question, was at the end of 2016, my mother was diagnosed with stomach cancer. I got the phone call. It was tremendously heartbreaking. She was the closest person to me on this planet and loved her dearly. And I started going back and forth from Los Angeles, where I lived, to London, where my mother lived and I grew up. Every month, I'd go there for 4 or 5 days to be with her during chemo, to be with her during her sessions and treatments, to take care of her. I had this idea that I was going to heal my mother. I was going to keep her alive. I was going to, fix her, so to speak, and get her health in check, and green juice, supplements, powder, alternative therapies. And after the first month or so, I realized that no matter what I did, she was not going to survive. I started to realize that she was in fact dying. And it was very humbling, because I saw that I was not in control of her process and her soul's journey and this process that she was in. And that forced me to surrender in a very profound way. It was through that surrender and the acceptance and surrender of her death and her dying process, and I got to be with her for an entire year, that it freed me up to fully be present with her, because I was not in resistance, to fully just love her, to fully savor every moment, because I realized that every moment, every conversation, every voicemail, every text message, every time I held her hand could be the last moment. And the moment where I think the seed of the book, The Magic of Surrender, was planted for me was during her year of dying, basically. She was a very emotional woman, but she was never sad. She was never, truly, not as a spiritual bypass. She was never sad. She was never complaining. She never felt like a victim. She never cried. She was completely at peace. And when the doctors told her, you probably have days or weeks, maybe months to live, and the reality hit me again, I looked at my mother and I said to her, are you afraid of death? Are you afraid of dying? And she looks me in the eyes. We were sitting in the car on a Thursday, I think it was afternoon. And she said, no, I'm not afraid of dying, because I know I'm not this body, that this body is just a vehicle for my soul. And then I said to my mother, is there anything I can do for you as your son to make your life better? Is there anything I can do for you to, what do you need? What do you need? I want to provide whatever you need, or what do you want for the rest of your days? And she said to me something very profound. She said, there's nothing that I need. There's nothing that I want. She said, all I want, and I think this was the key, with the book, the seed of the book was planted and I was not aware. She said to me, The only thing I want for my life is what God wants for my life. And it was a simple statement, not even a religious statement, but it was just a simple statement. What I understood was she was living in surrender. She wasn't attached to living. She wasn't attached to dying. She just wanted the highest unfolding for her destiny and her soul. And I think that was her freedom. And I saw that she had been living surrender for her whole life. I just hadn't realized it. And that's what also, when she passed away, as I started marinating on the book, I realized this is kind of what I have been living vicariously through my parents and my childhood and upbringing. This theme of surrender was a theme throughout my whole life. And so that's how it came about.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I have not lost either of my parents yet, but I am so afraid for when my mother dies. And just, I've actually sat and imagined it before. And it's like, oh my God, it just feels so painful. So
Yeah.
I really appreciate you going
Yeah.
there, because I know that it can't feel good to talk about even way after it's happened.
Mm.
And I think I remember hearing your father is a pretty prominent religious leader in Africa. Is that correct?
Yeah, my father is a minister, a spiritual teacher, shall we say, spiritual guru of sorts. He is like an African Siddha, so to speak, in that he built 300 churches in Ghana, West Africa. He built a huge church in London, 4,000 or 5,000 people every Sunday at its height, hundreds of thousands of followers in his congregation in Ghana, West Africa, and throughout Africa, actually. He was a spiritual teacher to the king, to the president of Ghana, presidents of Ghana, heads of states throughout Africa. My first memories as a young boy was, I remember being, 5, maybe 6, 7, 8 years old in that zone and seeing a crippled woman crawling on the floor. She picks up the sand that this man walks on, and he doesn't know, and wipes it on her face. She hadn't walked in probably years, and she stands up. Crowd goes crazy. Week after week, I grew up seeing blind people see and deaf people hear. The same. My father would look at a woman in a wheelchair, for instance, who hadn't walked in 10 years, and he would say, "Why are you in this wheelchair?" "Because I'm sick," she would say. And he would say, "No, no, no. Why are you in this wheelchair? Do you believe or not? Do you have faith or not?" "I have faith." "Then if you have faith, stand up." And this would go on for I'm a kid watching this. This would go on for like 5 minutes. And finally he would say, "Stand up." He would put his hands on a man who couldn't see, and sight was restored. I mean, the stuff you read about, you don't really believe, but I grew up around it. No cameras, no social media, just seeing this stuff week after week. And so my father was known as the miracle man of Africa, and that was his nickname. And I was supposed to take over my father's churches when I was a kid, so I started speaking when I was age 8, which was kind of funny. I never wanted to speak. I was more interested in playing soccer on a Sunday, but I was thrown into the stage when I was age 8. And that's when something opened in me that I couldn't explain. And I can't explain what happened, but a stream of energy started flowing that was a bit mystifying, but something came through. And so when I was 14, my father announced to the congregation in London that my son is taking over my churches. Unbeknownst to me, him and I hadn't had a conversation about it. I was shocked. It was confusing because I loved my father. We weren't close. Our relationship was a little estranged. He was this iconic figure, so not someone you really argue with. And he just announced this to everyone. My son is taking over. I'm confused. But I knew that I wanted to help people, but I knew that this was not my path. I just felt that the structure of religion, and my father was very spiritual and mystical at this point. So it wasn't like an old school dogmatic Christianity, very mystical. He went to India in the 60s and had these enlightenment experiences, with gurus and monks and sages. And so I grew up in this very spiritual environment, but I just knew that my path was not through the structure of the church or religion. But when he announced to the congregation that my son is taking over, I was too afraid to say anything. My fear was, if I spoke to my father, if I dared to be myself, then I would not be loved. If I dared to be myself, then I would be outcast. If I dared to be myself, then he would reject me and everyone else would reject me and I would be alone. And so I think, like many of us do, I went along with it. I betrayed my truth and got ordained in this big ceremony. And for 4 years, from 14 to 18, went through a lot of depression, struggle, turmoil, confusion, soul searching. But when I turned 18, my life began to change because I realized I had to make some decisions about my life. And I think life is a process of decisions, and the decisions that we make can change the course of our destiny. And I looked into my future and I saw that I could my life was set out for me by my father and everyone else. And I could take the expected path and I could be successful by everyone else's standards. But I really felt that if I didn't have myself, and if I didn't have my soul, if I didn't have my truth, if I didn't have my integrity, and I couldn't look myself in the mirror and at night, then what the hell do I have? To me, this was a soul suicide. And I saw that I would never be truly happy being someone that I'm not, and I would never be truly happy living someone else's life. And so I looked into the other path, the other alternative. I was called to come to the US. I wanted to come to America. I wanted to come to Los Angeles because for me, Los Angeles was the mecca of self-help. All the authors I'd read about as a kid, and I'd started to read all of these self-help books. We're talking, Tony Robbins, Jim Rohn, Marianne Williamson, Deepak Chopra, Jack Canfield, etc. They lived in Southern California, Louise Hay. I wanted to come and meet them and learn from them. And so I wanted to come to America and go into that field, although I had no idea how I was going to do it. I just felt this nudging, this calling to go into that field. And so it took me 4 years to muster up the courage to stop lying to myself. I think one of the things that blocks us from truly transforming, from truly being fulfilled, from truly fulfilling our destiny are all the ways that we don't tell the truth to ourselves, all the ways that we lie to ourselves about who we are and what we feel. And so I would ask anyone listening to really reflect on, what lies am I telling myself? What am I pretending to not know? We sometimes play this game of confusion. Like, I'm confused. I don't know what my truth is. I don't know if this relationship is right. And we stay in relationships that we know aren't aligned. We stay in jobs just to make money, which is, hey, we do what we need to do, but we stay in jobs to make money, even though we know for years, even though we know this is not the purpose for why I was born. And I think to live life not truly expressing the authentic purpose for why we were born, and to hold back our true nature, to hold back the depth of our loving, for me, is one of the most painful things as a human being. And so I think to truly shift our lives, we have to be willing to tell the truth to ourselves. We have to be willing to really sit with, what am I pretending to not know? There is a part of us that knows everything, because at the deepest level, I think we are everything. And then, third question, just for folks to sit with perhaps, is, what are the lies that I'm telling myself? What is it really costing me? Because I think when we lie to ourselves, when we don't live our truth, when we don't follow our soul, when we don't surrender to our deepest truth and listen to it and live in alignment and follow it, we end up going down inauthentic paths. And I think there is a cost and there is a pain to not live the truth. But what we tend to do as human beings, when we feel that pain, we tend to distract ourselves, meditate it away, medicate it away, shop it away, sex it away, eat it away, social media away, just numb ourselves, distract ourselves from the pain, which then allows us to continue the behaviors that aren't aligned. But I would say that pain is and I felt a lot of pain as a kid, a lot of pain when 17, 18, knowing that I was not living my truth. It was very painful. To me, pain is a blessing. Pain is your friend. Pain is feedback. Pain is not bad. Pain is just feedback that something is not in alignment. Pain is feedback that there's some truth you're not telling yourself. If we continue denying that pain will often turn into depression. That pain will turn into some kind of internal turmoil. That pain will often manifest that we attract people in our lives that express that pain to us. That pain might manifest in sort of blockages in life. That pain might manifest in drama that we unconsciously create to sabotage the progress of what we're doing that's really not working because we don't want to do it. That pain might manifest as some physical dis-ease or illness. And so I think we have to really use pain as a guide and a messenger to ask ourselves, what is this pain telling me? And where do I need to bring myself back into alignment? And so I finally had the conversation with my father, told him that I wasn't going to take over. Scariest moment in my life. We didn't speak for 2 years, which was deeply challenging. And I won a green card, cut a long story short. I won a green card in the lottery and came to the US. And that's what began my path. And I really feel that when we follow our truth, when we truly surrender and we follow our truth, we follow our soul. Our soul is tapped into an intelligence. And when we follow our soul, that intelligence will guide us, even though we don't know where our soul is leading us. I believe our soul always takes us to the perfect destination. It may not take us the route or the road that we most expect. And so I ended up winning a green card. Came to the US, 2 suitcases, $800, and began my journey. And that was, 20 years ago.
Wow, that is an amazing story. You have an amazing life so far. I know it's going to be even more amazing, I think, as time goes on. It sounds like. And just being around in the environment that you were in growing up, and then kind of juxtapose against this experience with your mother, hearing you say earlier about how your an original sort of approach to hearing when your mother was
Mm.
sick. And it makes a lot of sense to me that you would be very optimistic that a healing could occur, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And it
Hmm.
made me wonder, I guess, a little bit about miracles. I want to talk about letting go as well later, but in terms of miracles, what do you think a miracle is?
What is a miracle? On one level, a miracle is, say, a shift in the way you can see things. A miracle is that which is outside of the norm, that which is outside of the standard, that which is outside of the expected, that which is outside of the linear, an anomaly, so to speak. So, a miracle is maybe an event that doesn't follow the typical progression of events up until now. And so, a lot of people do ask me, wow, you're around all these miracles, blind people seeing. That shit sounds like things out of the Bible. Is that really real? People say, could I see this thing? I see miracles on TV and these things happening, but I always thought it was fake. I saw it every Sunday. No cameras, no hype, no reporters. Every Sunday, no different than you brush your teeth. I witnessed it. I saw it. I know it's possible. I would ask my father, I think when I got into my 20s, I would ask him, finally, how do these miracles happen? How do they happen? How do you perform these miracles? My father was a revered miracle man, revered. Presidents, kings, politicians would come to him. He would pray for them. Things would go down. That's how he built his reputation. Unexplainable things would happen in people's lives when he blessed them and he prayed for them. And so I asked him one day, how do you do miracles? What's the formula? Is there a formula? And here is a man for 50 years, 60 years who has done miracles, performed miracles. And I think he told me a very, very true statement, a very real statement. He said to me, I don't perform miracles. I don't do miracles. Miracles have nothing to do with me. He said to me, God does miracles. All I do is I get myself out of the way and I show up and I just I simply see the perfection in a human being. I simply see the perfection in a person. I simply see the perfection in another soul. I simply see the divinity in another person. That's all I see. I get myself out of the way and I see their perfection. And then from there, whatever happens, happens. And if they're willing to believe and open to dimension of possibility, then something may happen. But it has nothing to do with me. And I think that's so telling and on some level, an ultimate humility, because a lot of times, people, especially in self-help, they want to manifest their life and make miracles happen. But to me, it's the ego that wants to be the doer. It's the ego that wants to be the one to do these miracles so it can be powerful as a way of reinforcing its own sense of identity and existence. But if you look at all the great ones, all of the true great ones, where miracles did happen through them, you look at Mandela. Miracles happen through Mandela in a certain way. Miracle of bringing people together, ending apartheid. That's a miracle. You look at Martin Luther King, in terms of the civil rights movement. Miracles there. Mother Teresa, blessing, feeding, taking care of the sick. Miracles happen through them. But I think in all of those examples of true greatness, I'm not talking about like Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant greatness or true greatness. They all got themselves out of the way. And miracles at that level were able to happen beyond their own personal power. And for me, that's the kind of invitation, the shift in paradigm that I'm wanting to invite people to, is a shift from personal power to, should we call it soul power, individual power, to infinite power, to allow the infinite intelligence of life to manifest. And so if you look at Jesus, to me, Jesus was an example of the possibility for us all as human beings, of a human being, of a man who was able to perhaps realize his true nature. And I think when we're able to realize our true nature, our true Christness, then Jesus said, not me, not Kute, not Heather, Jesus said, the things that I do, you can do these things and more. You can do these things and more. And so I kind of take that seriously. What does he mean? You can do these things and more. But we have to be open. We have to be available. I think that's one of the beginning of miracles, to be open, to be available. And Jesus also said, someone who fed the 5,000 and the blind and raising the dead, Jesus specifically said, it's not I that do these miracles. Jesus never said, look at me, I'm Jesus, look how great I am, I do these miracles. He always said, it's not I that do these miracles. I don't do this. I, as an I, individual I, do these miracles. It's the Father that does these miracles through me. The Father, life, intelligence, nature, pure consciousness, does the miracles through me. He realized, I think, the ultimate key to miracles. Miracles are the nature of life. Miracles are the nature of existence. Miracles, life is miraculous. Miracles are the nature of what is. And Jesus realized, the great ones realized this key, that I am not the doer. The ego wants to be the doer, to make shit happen, to do things, to create. But the great ones realized, I'm not the doer. Life is the doer. They were able to get themselves out the way and let life, in all its intelligence, move through them and create through them and flow through them and manifest through them. Then they were not limited to their ego's experience, to the ego's limitation, to their personality's foibles, to their personality's past experience. They weren't limited. And that's, I think, when miracles happen. Miracles, on some level, are always happening. We're just not always available. We're often getting in the way. And many people would ask me, and so I think the more we can get ourselves out the way, the more miracles can flow through us in ways we cannot imagine. And we begin to realize, whoa, I have nothing to do with these miracles. And it's very humbling to live in true humility that way. And when people often ask me too, wow, cool, you live such an interesting life, these miracles growing up as a child, wow, wow, wow. I think a real miracle, I tell people, if you really want to see a miracle, I'll show you a miracle. Go to the mirror right now and look into your eyes. There's a miracle. Right now, as we sit here having this conversation, it's a miracle that right now, we're not in the same location. You're speaking, I'm speaking, I hear your voice. It goes through this, I don't know, speaker sound thing, computer, and I hear the projection of your voice. You hear the projection of my voice. Right now, you've been breathing, I've been breathing. There's thousands of breaths that have been happening while we're having this conversation. In spite of us, something is breathing you. Something is breathing me. And intelligence is breathing you. You had breakfast this morning. I had breakfast this morning, lunch, dinner. And how was it that maybe you ate a piece of salmon or you ate a kale or banana? And how is it that your nose doesn't turn into a piece of kale? There's an intelligence inside that knows what to do. There are trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions of processes happening every moment inside of just your body alone, in spite of us. Is this not a miracle? So somehow I feel like we stopped paying attention. We've taken it for granted that, wait a second, there is a miracle that is happening just inside of my body. This innate intelligence is miraculous. And I think the more we can bring our attention to this miraculous nature of what we are as humans, and then go even deeper as what is then breathing us, when we can bring our attention to the miracle that we are, even just on that level, then I think we also open ourselves to more miracles in our life. So miracles are available all the time. Miracles are the nature of life. Miracles are the very foundation of what we are. And I think the more we're open to it, the more we become available to it, the more we invoke and invite miracles in our lives, the more we get out of the way.
If you want to create a more receptive body, free from toxins, inflammation, and metabolic issues, would it be crazy for you to explore booking an Ayurvedic consultation with me? There's probably never been a more perfect time to do it. Every day you wait matters when it comes to your health. So if you're ready to get your body back in balance, I'll give you a 30-day plan to get you started. Go to heathergrish.com to book a consultation. That's Heather, GRZYCH.com. Yeah, I've definitely had that experience of something happens and I'm like, why was I wanting this other thing? Gosh, my imagination is not nearly as amazing as what nature can do in the end. Okay, so this is even like a messed up question for me to even be asking it.
Go for it. Let's roll. I like messed up questions because they're better than the standard just roll questions. Let's go.
You're going to love this one. Okay. Because in order to surrender, there's a part of me that goes, what do I have to do to surrender? So you were talking about getting out of my own way, but then there's this other part that's like, well, I will make myself get out of the way. So I guess, everybody has their own, some people do it through meditation, some people do it through drugs, some people do it through, what are the, I guess, different ways, or is there a simple way or even a process that we could go through to allow a surrender?
Got it. I get your question. That's a profound question. I love that question. And so, I think the ego, which is our sort of sense of self that we identify as based on our memories, emotions, feelings, thoughts, collection of experiences, and we attach to that creates our sense of self. And so the ego is always wanting to be the doer and reinforce itself. So now it says, naturally, what do I do to surrender? Because I've got to do surrender. I've got to make surrender happen. And in that paradigm, I think first we get to just observe this mechanism that is constantly wanting to now do surrender as a kind of another way to, shall we say, reinforce its existence. And so if we can just observe that desire, observe that impulse, observe that arising, and just be with it without judgment, be with it without indulging, be with it without even acting on it or judging it, but just notice this impulse that's like, God, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? And just be with it and kind of get curious about, well, what is it that wants to do? What is this? Where is this impulse arising from? And if we're not feeling surrendered, if we are in a moment of resistance, and I'll talk about a few stages of surrender in a moment, but if we're in a moment of resistance, I think one of the keys is to also not fight the resistance. Sometimes surrender is to surrender to the inability to surrender with full awareness, to surrender to the fact that right now I'm not surrendered, and that's okay. And the relationship with our non-surrender is part of the surrender. To be with the non-surrender removes a layer of resistance so that we can be with that and even explore and massage underneath what the resistance is in the non-surrender. So sometimes you have to surrender to the fact, I'm not really feeling surrendered right now, but let me be with that. And I think that can create a little bit of spaciousness rather than any fight. And so to me, life is a process of surrender. Life itself is a process of surrender. I think to a degree, and some people might disagree and it's okay. I think drugs can give people a glimpse for a moment of, they're sort of surrendering the ego for a moment. But I really do feel that even though it gives you a glimpse, it's like a plant medicine, a drug, or what have you, whatever it is. It's like if you're skiing, it can take you in the helicopter, take you to the top of the mountain and drop you off. And now you have the glimpse of the vista of surrender. You have the glimpse, wow, wow, wow. Then when you get down to the mountain, it's cool, but you haven't necessarily gone through the process, the mental, emotional, spiritual, psychological, rigorous process on all levels to integrate the depth of surrender into your being and your nervous system so you can embody that on all levels. You had the glimpse of the mountaintop, but you haven't built the infrastructure within yourself because you didn't climb the mountaintop. And I feel like surrender is the reason I say life is a process of surrender. Life is a classroom for your soul, because through the process of living and through the process of experiencing, through the process of dis-ease, heartbreak, breakup, betrayal, parents dying, all of these experiences, why do they happen? Ultimately, to help us and teach us to surrender. Death, surrender. We surrender now, tomorrow, next week, next lifetime, but we will have to surrender. And that moment of death, we're going to have to surrender. There's no way out. And so I think when we can embrace and understand that life itself is a process of surrender, it can shift our relationship to the process of living. And so just to kind of lay out a few phases. So the first phase, or even a pre-phase, is we're just living life, how we've been conditioned to live life, maybe based on our parents and based on what we've been told, based on our culture, based on our religion. And we're in denial. We're unconscious and we're in denial. Let's call this phase one. We're in denial and we don't even know that we're lying. We don't even know anything. We're just living what we've been taught to live, what we've been conditioned to live based on our childhood and upbringing. Then we begin questioning. It's kind of another phase. We begin to question, like, wait a second, maybe there's more here. Maybe things aren't what I was told they were. Maybe life isn't what I was told it was. This relationship isn't quite working for me. Maybe this job is not really why I was put on the planet. Maybe my health is a little off and I need to make some changes. Maybe this addiction and the alcohol thing it's not really working. Maybe something. And so we begin questioning. This is another phase. Then the next phase is, because we begin questioning and we know that there's a deeper or some deeper reality to surrender to move into, the ego, our sense of identity, our sense of self, kicks in as a self-preservation mechanism to keep us stuck, to keep us the same, to protect its identity. So the resistance of where we are versus where we're kind of guided to move, resistance kicks in. Resistance is a natural phase in the evolution and process of surrender. And so we begin to resist. And I think many of us were stuck in the level of resistance for years. We're fighting, we're resisting, self-protection. Then we move from resistance to, let's call it negotiation. We begin negotiating. Well, maybe if I can keep eating 7 Big Macs a week and only work out once a week and I'll be fine. But okay, I would eat 3 Big Macs a week. We're kind of negotiating. We're in a relationship that we know is not working and it hasn't been working, but he's got potential. Maybe it can, and we know it's not right. And so the negotiation begins as a way to kind of keep us holding on. Sometimes we negotiate, let's say in a relationship for 20 years. 20 years go by and we've been negotiating, maybe not. It could change. He might change. They've got potential. And so that's the next phase. The next phase is we begin realizing finally that nothing that we do, like this was a moment with my mother when I realized no matter how much green juice I give her, no matter what protocol I put her on, no matter what supplements I give her, she's going to die. I realized that pretty early on, even before the doctors taught me. When I accepted that, surrendered to that, honestly, it freed me up to savor every moment even more fully because I knew death was coming. It was real. It was happening, at least to her physical body. And that freed me up to love her and hug her. And every time I saw her was the last time. And it was so precious, so precious. And so when you stop negotiating, then you can move into relationship to the next phase. You can move into reality, moving into reality through acceptance. We have to, at some point, we realize no matter what we're going to do, nothing will change. I am what I am. My spouse is going to be who they are. This is what it is. My financial situation is what it is. Now what? You can't change reality if you are resisting reality. And the only way to start changing reality is to come into relationship with it. And so I think sometimes we have to experience enough pain. And so if we're not surrendering, what do we do? I would invite people to not numb yourself from the pain, but feel the pain, acknowledge and feel the pain. of what it is to resist. Because resistance is suffering. When we resist and we resist and we resist and we resist, it is painful. And one of the ways we cope is we disconnect and we numb and we distract. But if we don't do that and we remove those distractions and we let ourselves be with the pain, it is painful. And I think if we're really with it to a point consciously, that pain will actually move us to a point where we have to move into the next phase because it's too much, it's too painful, of acceptance. When we accept what is, this is what it is, this is who you are, this is what is. But what I do want to say is acceptance does not mean surrender. And this is where I think a lot of people get stuck in the phase of accepting what is. For instance, if it's raining outside, you accept it's raining outside. You're like, Kute, it's raining outside. But it freaking shouldn't be raining outside. And why is it always raining outside? And you take an umbrella, you go outside, you're accepting it's raining, but you're moaning and groaning and complaining that it's raining outside. So there's still a pattern of internal resistance inside. The experience that I'm having is not the experience that I should be having. I should be having some other experience than the experience that I'm having right now. Whenever you're in a moment of suffering, I guarantee you, if you step back and become aware and check yourself. So what can you do? Step back when you're in a moment of resistance or stuckness. And when you're in a moment of pain, step back and you'll see there's going to be that level of the experience that I'm having is not the experience I should be having. I should be having some other experience. Look at that, be with that, become conscious of that, own that. And so acceptance is a good faith, but surrender is a phase beyond that. Surrender is the open-hearted participation with the process of life. The open-hearted, full participation with the experience that is happening in your life right now. You can participate with something or a relationship, but it doesn't mean you're open-hearted with it. And so there's two things that will really help in the understanding to move into that open-hearted participation. The first thing is a belief. This is a belief of mine that I found is really helpful. It's a belief that the universe is always working for your highest good. Even if you can't see it right now, and sometimes we can't see it in this moment because we want what we want. And what we think we want is what we want, but sometimes it's not. I can't tell you how many times I thought I wanted something to be or a relationship to be, and then when it ended, I was distraught, or when it didn't work out, I was distraught. But 5 years later, 3 years later, I looked back and I said, thank God that didn't work out. Sometimes things not working out is actually grace, a deeper intelligence from the universe, but our ego, our personality is not able to see. It's like looking at a painting. We see the small corner of a painting, a little dot, but we can't see how that dot, because we're not looking at the entire painting. We're not looking at the entire multi-dimensional tapestry of life. We're not able to see how that one moment connects to an infinite stream of life and possibilities in our grand future and destiny, and et cetera, et cetera. And so it's so important to realize the universe is always working for your highest good. My belief is if something doesn't work out, if a relationship ends, that means the universe is bringing something better to the situation, something more, something beyond. And so I think if we kind of adopt that belief, then it frees us up a bit more to then live with curiosity. Like, this is not working out. Curious. What better thing could be happening? Let me stay curious. Let me stay open. That's the surrender and the openness. And so also, when I say the open-hearted participation in the process of what's unfolding, it's realizing that we are souls. We incarnate into this human experience as souls to grow, learn, and evolve. There's lessons that we have to grow, learn, and evolve. And if life is the classroom, the university for our souls, that means every experience, every situation, every relationship, everything is part of the curriculum for our souls, learning and evolution. And so even if a situation, a relationship is challenging, it's difficult, it's challenging, this is messed up. Yes, if we just stay at the level of the story, he did this, they did that, this happened, that, it can be very difficult and we may never get out of it. We may never surrender. But if we realize this is a classroom, what is my soul seeking to learn in this situation? What is this person seeking to teach my soul in this situation? Why did I attract the situation into my life? And what is the evolutionary lesson? And sometimes the lesson comes wrapped in gift wrapping that we have to unwrap so we can activate and see and touch and feel and integrate the gift. But if we learn the lesson, then I think even if the situation is difficult, we're able to surrender to the lesson. But between acceptance and surrender, there is a phase that most people miss. And I think this is a key to unlock, which also might tap into your question of, well, what do I do to kind of surrender? And not that it's a doing, but I think it can point at least in the direction. The phase that most people miss that unlocks the key to surrender, the bridge from acceptance to surrender, is grieving. Grieving. Many times we don't allow ourselves to authentically, truly grieve. We think grieving is weak. We think grieving is bad. We think it's not okay. We think it's not acceptable. We think it's not spiritual. But you see, surrender is a death. It's a death, big death, small death. Surrender is a death of who we thought we were, how we thought life was going to be. 2020, we had all these plans, pandemic hit, many of our goals and dreams and desires fell by the wayside and things died. And so to allow the grieving allows us to let go of the old so we can fully open-heartedly embrace and surrender to the new. When we don't allow ourselves to grieve, there's a part of our heart that stays stuck in the past, and there's a part of our heart that is not available to the new. And sometimes we don't allow ourselves to grieve because it's not spiritual, we judge. Or we feel it will last forever, or we feel it will never end, or we won't be able to cope. It's going to be too much. It's going to be too intense. Sometimes we do a spiritual bypass around, let's say, grieving because law of attraction, we want to stay in a high frequency, high vibration. But the challenge is when we suppress the grieving energy in those layers and those emotions, it just stays stuck in our vibratory field, stays stuck in our heart, our body, our physiology, our nervous system. That old energy, then we drag with us into our future, and we will tend to recreate and manifest situations that reinforce the old stuck energy of grief that we haven't felt, and we won't be fully available. And so to truly open to surrender, I would invite everyone to really sit with, what grief am I carrying? What have I not completed? Look at your relationships. Look at your dreams. Look at your situations. Look at your friendships. Maybe there was a, miscarriage. Maybe there was a breakup. Maybe there was a bankruptcy. Maybe there was a failure, a rejection that maybe it wasn't one thing, but an accumulation of several little things that have chipped away in your heart. That because you haven't fully let yourself grieve, there's a part of your heart, even unconsciously, that might be protecting you from really getting excited, really being available, and you don't even realize that you're not even really open to love because you've been hurt in the past so many times. So it's easier to not be fully open to love now because you're carrying that pain, grief. And so sometimes we're not even open that maybe I'm not even really open to love, because if I was open to love, I could lose it. And so I'm closed. So I think to really surrender, be open and available, what we can do is to sit and write about, what have I not grieved? What have I not acknowledged I'm not complete with? Where am I still carrying? Even if it's 5, 10, 2, 3, 10, 20% hurt, sadness, incompletion. And be with that. Journal it, write about it, feel it, communicate it, make amends about it, pick up the phone, forgive yourself, and do that internal work. Because as we do, then we let go, and then we can move into that state of surrender. Then we can move into that next phase, final phase, let's say phase 7, of we're in the magic zone. We're in the flow. When we're in the flow, how we know we're in the flow? Because we're following the energy of life. We're able to live open to the unknown, letting life lead us. We're following this pure energy, being guided. We're following the wave. We're riding the wave. And shall we say, things start happening in our lives synchronistically. Magic starts happening that we couldn't have planned. We start bumping into people because we're in the flow. When we're in the flow, we're riding the wave. We're in the flow. That's when magic happens.
I don't know if you've ever studied Ayurveda, but there's actually, I feel like what you're talking about
Mm,
is kind of the energetic way of shifting the energies that we often try to move via physical manipulation, whether it's through
mm,
herbs or because it's interesting hearing you talk about grieving. And as you're speaking, of course, I'm like tearing up thinking about all the things I need to continue grieving in my own life.
yeah, yeah.
And, just this idea of, because I've done this a million times in my life where there's a grieving that's happening, and then there's this sense of urgency to take an action
Mm,
to solve it, to not feel that grief.
mm-hmm,
And when we do that, there's actually, we don't allow the humors of the body, we'll say like the mucus that's trapped there, or, whatever
interesting.
the sort of the blood or the whatever the
Mm,
physical matter is that's been holding that pattern and supporting that pattern in the body as it gets released when we feel the
mm-hmm,
grieving,
mm-hmm,
when we move into action, instead of those energies and the physical material actually going out through the detox processes of the body, it actually moves back into an organ of action
mm, mm,
wherever
mm.
the action goes. So I think that what you're talking about is, how to have this release on an energetic level in the same way that like we might, this is kind of gross, but make somebody throw up or,
Yeah, yeah,
you know.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. When my mother passed away, it was so interesting because I had been grieving her for a year, but the depth of grief I experienced when she passed away was, people think grieving is like bad, but the depth of grief I felt was actually exquisitely beautiful. It's excruciatingly beautiful. It was like the excruciating beauty of grief. Because through the grief, see, no, when we limit the grief, we limit the love. We limit our heart's capacity to love on the other side. And so for me, it was through the grieving that I was able to release her. One of the reasons, I think it's good to be aware of it, that we sometimes don't grieve or allow ourselves resist grief or surrender to the grief is not grieving is sometimes an unconscious way to hold on to something or hold on to a person. Because if I don't grieve my mother fully, or if I don't grieve the end of that relationship with my husband fully, or boyfriend fully, or girlfriend fully, then maybe it's not really done. Then maybe it's not really over. And so grieving can be a protective mechanism from truly letting go. And so for me, when my mother passed, one thing I really made a point to do was make space and time to grieve. And sometimes, grief doesn't always happen on a timeline. Grief doesn't always happen on a weekend. Grief may not always happen on some just a few hour, plant medicine ceremony. It happens in layers. And the more we are able to consciously, with awareness, with full presence, in this conscious state, feel, grieve, release, because all feelings remain present until fully felt. And when we don't allow the healthy expression and letting go of the feeling, then those feelings will often, not only will we carry it with us, but those feelings will often manifest in unhealthy ways in our life. And so all feelings have a cycle. And when we feel them and be present with them, the layer of the grief dissolves. And so grief can happen in stages and grief can happen in layers. And so for me, with my mother, I felt a wave of grief. But that grief then it broke my heart open. See, it was the grief that shattered the shape of my heart. My current heart's capacity through the grieving was shattered. And it wasn't like what I broke. It was more like the limitation of my heart's capacity to feel and love broke open. And when I went through that, and this is what I want people to realize, when you go through that threshold, the fear is, I won't survive. I'll be broken. You'll be broken open. And what I found was there was a dimension, another room in the heart, and a dimension of more love. And then you explore that room, and then you come to the edge of that, and then there's more grieving, another layer, and you feel through that, and then boom, you kind of shatter open into another expansiveness of loving through that grief. And so I think grief can be a profound process of what we can be and do to feel, to let go, and expand our capacity to love. And look, no feeling lasts forever. And I think everyone should know that no feeling lasts forever. And what really helps too is if you take whatever you're going through in terms of letting go, if you take, sometimes labels are limiting. So if you take the label off of the emotion, sadness, grief, whatever it is, hurt, just take the label off. Because sometimes that can get in the way. Oh, this is good and that's bad. When you take the label off and you just be present with the sensation, the pure sensation and energy of that feeling, that now we're no longer labeling anything, but you're just experiencing the sensation in your body and noticing it, being present with it without judgment and allowing it to move through, you will often find that the sensation starts moving through and completing itself as you're fully with it without any force or judgment or resistance. That's also a way to move through some things.
Kute, I think I could listen to you talk for 5 days in a row, nonstop.
I'm honored. I'm honored.
You really do have a gift. I am so grateful that you took the time to have this interview today. And I'm so excited to have the listeners hear your story and these beautiful lessons that you've shared. Last question would be, what does the wisdom of the body mean to you?
What is the wisdom of the body? To me, there is an intelligence in the body. The body has a wisdom. If you cut your finger, it knows how to heal. It knows what to do. And so there's an innate intelligence that's moving in the body, that the more we can live that and trust that and allow that to move and flow, I think the freer we will be, beyond the mind. And so I trust the wisdom of the body. To me, the wisdom of the body is the wisdom of life, is the wisdom of the divine, is the wisdom of the soul, is the wisdom of, because the wisdom of the body is just not the wisdom of the body. The wisdom of the body is the wisdom of this, because what's living the body, that's the wisdom. What's living the body is the innate intelligence, is the infinite. That's what's living the body. And so I think as a humanity, we've kind of lost touch with that. We don't trust our body. We don't trust our immune system. We don't trust our own ability to heal because we've forgotten who we are, that we are a part of nature and that we are the body, but we're not the body. And we are the body as the body, but we're also more than the body. And yet we are the body, And so I think let's remember that we're a part of nature. And what's living the body is life, it's consciousness, it's infinite. And I think as we trust that and relax into that, surrender to that, we bring ourselves back into a natural flow rather than overriding the body from the outside in and making it to be something that it's not, and filling ourselves with all sorts of drugs that disconnect us from the cycle, the monthly cycle, the daily cycle. The same thing as living the body. It's the same intelligence that is functioning the sun and the stars and the moon. Same intelligence that is functioning the oceans and the river, the same intelligence that's functioning all the bacteria and the amoebas and all multidimensional realms of existence, the same intelligence that is functioning the body. That wisdom is the wisdom of all existence. And so let's surrender to that. Let's trust that. And I think when we do, it knows exactly how to fulfill itself through us, in us, as us, in profound ways. That's when we will see miracles in our lives. And our life will be proof of that wisdom.
Oof, you got me. Kute, how can everyone follow your work? Whether I know you have this amazing blog and also your book's coming out now. What are the best ways for people to look you up?
Yeah, the best ways. The book, The Magic of Surrender, Finding the Courage to Let Go, is out now. People can pre-order, depending on when they're listening to this conversation. They can go to www.themagicofsurrender.com. That's themagicofsurrender.com. Get the book on Amazon and then enter your name and info there and just make sure you get your free gifts and all of that good stuff. and kuteblackson.com, my website. I'm on Facebook. I'm on IG. I do a really special 12-day event to Bali twice a year. BoundlessBlissBali.com. People can find out more there and just connect and say hi on social media.
Yes, if you want more Kute, he has a lot of content, and check him out. And thank you so much for being here today, Kute, and I can't wait to talk with you again sometime.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for tuning in and dropping in with us today. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. I really want to hear your feedback. To learn more about my work, visit heathergrish.com. That's Heather, GRZYCH.com. And meet me here next time on The Wisdom of the Body.